only one of us will make it out. So you put other people to get on top.
What is the biggest money mistake you've made?
Being too kind. You're too broke not to be visible. If you surround yourself with what you want to see, you have no other option but to do it.
A lot of people do associate being poor with being godly.
Don't pray for wealth that your character cannot sustain. If you're broke, it may actually be for a reason. God cannot trust you with wealth beyond your heart posture. I entered into my marriage with a lot of resentment towards my husband because of finances. I didn't realize I had survivor's guilt. For a long time, I started to feel guilty that I was the one that was blessed. I think a lot of people underestimate how much your soul issues impact your wealth. We literally only had £20 in our joint account. At the end of the event, we went from £20 to 20k. Don't follow passion, always follow solution. I was broke on purpose. I wasn't just broke for broke's sake. How dare you be bold about the fact that you make money as a Christian?
I hope you guys are excited to get into this episode. Don't forget, if you would like to purchase an investment property in Dubai, make sure to fill out the form below and book a free consultation with me. So welcome to the Building Wealth with No Borders podcast with me, Lamide Elizabeth, where I'll be bringing you guests from around the world to share their strategies on building wealth. And today we are in Dubai with international speaker, consultant, Christian influencer.
Yeah, I guess so.
Hayley Mulenda, yay! I'm so excited to have you here. One of the things I like about you is, Hayley, you're so funny, you know, because...
Oh, thank you. I'm so happy.
You're actually funny. But when I first met you, I felt like... one thing I really like about you is you don't treat people... When we first met, we were selected as the UK's top 10 Black students, right?
Period.
But you were really trying to be my friend, I felt like. And I was like, this girl, like... What
Did you think
it?
I was a beg?
Yeah.
I'm actually offended because you know in London to call someone a beg, that's a swear word. How dare
I was like, what is it? But you're so like, I just really like you as a person. And I felt like at that point, I wasn't really doing any of the stuff that I was doing now, but I still felt like you respected me and you treated me in a way that I was like, what is it? Like, even you would pop up to my stories. I was like, this girl was really friendly. I think because I'm really the opposite, right? I'm one that maybe you scoped me out, but I scope people out first for a very long time before I then approach for friendship, or even just to get to know them. But I was just like, this girl, like, you just didn't strike me as someone who, I don't know, you just struck me as someone who would treat everyone well, regardless of like whatever the situation was. And so I was like, you know what? Yeah, let me just be friends with her then, I guess.
So you're basically saying you settled for our friendship.
No, because I saw you as a good person. So I was like, okay, cool. But I'm happy to have you here.
Yeah.
Like I was telling you before, for you guys who are listening, you might not know, but I do have criteria for the guests that I bring on this podcast. And one of them is actually to be above the age of 30, mainly because it is people who I want to learn from. Not that I can't learn from people who are like around me, but I feel like I'm the younger voice. I'm the Gen Z voice. And so I like to get people who are, you know, quite a bit older. But one thing about you is you have knowledge that surpasses your age. So I'm happy to have you here.
Thank
For
you.
The people who don't know you, can you introduce yourself?
Well, apparently I'm a beg. apparently so. No, I'm joking. My name is Hayley Mulenda Records. I am a wife, most importantly, to my amazing husband. I'm a child of God. I'm a speaker. I've been speaking since the age of 15. So speaking for the past 12 years, spoken with all the big guns. And I say from Microsoft to IBM to UK Cabinet Office. I sit on the D&I board for Wagamama. I've worked with NBC, Meta and Google out here in the Middle East. I've done work across Africa, Middle East, UK, USA, Europe. I've had the opportunity to travel around the world through speaking, and I'm so grateful. I definitely would say one thing. I'm a lover of life and a lover of people. I love being able to see the greatness being able to be manifest into people. I love being able to use my words to speak life and to speak into destinies and not destructions. So I think that's a summary, and I'm funny.
Yeah, you are. Yeah.
Period.
Did you mention that you've made 7 figures from public speaking?
Oh, yes. Do you know what the thing is? I felt for a really long time, I felt really uncomfortable to say that because especially in Christian spaces, and we'll go into it, for Christian spaces, you come across cocky because it's kind of like, how dare you? How dare you be bold about the fact that you make money as a Christian? How dare you be bold about the fact that you are in ministry? Because I am also in ministry. I have a ministry. And then on top of that, I also have a business. So how dare you? So I think for a long time, I felt very uncomfortable about it. And I had particular voices that would kind of be like, you know, calm down. I had particular people even in my church at one point, the church that I was attending, that there was a time when I was sharing different testimonies and my testimonies would, you know, talk about money in terms of how much I was making for speaking. So there was a time when a client, I remember I'll never forget when I got my first ever 5-figure speaking engagement. I was 20 years old. So I was 20 years old and I had a big corporation from America basically come and say, listen, we want to pay you 20K, 45 minutes, we'll fly you out. And you can imagine me sharing that type of testimony at the age of 20. It shook some tables. And I remember literally someone grabbing me after and saying to me that you need to pipe down with your testimonies. You're doing too much.
Well, we're going to get into that.
We'll get into that.
Let's start with understanding your relationship with money growing up. So if you can talk a little bit about that.
So growing up in a single parent household, mum migrated from Africa. I grew up in one of the poorest boroughs in London, which is Newham Borough. I always say I grew up in Newham pre-Westfield. So this is before the gentrification. This is before the Olympic City. This is when Stratford was known as an area of knife crime and not for Zara and H&M. So, you know, growing up in that type of area, if I'm being honest, I was exposed to a lot of fraud growing up. So I was exposed to a lot of fraud growing up. I had a lot of boys I went to school with. They'll ask you for your squares. If you don't know what squares means, they'll ask you to get credit cards so that you can start doing frauds. And I always was scared simply because I always felt like God was going to use me as an example. That I would be the one that literally I got caught and then now I'm in prison or I was blacklisted. And also around the time, some of my friends that actually got into it, they're not my friends anymore, but they ended up getting blacklisted from banks. So we were around 15, 16 years old and some of us were able to open up our bank accounts and they weren't able to go to the high street because they had done fraud and they had been blacklisted from a NatWest or a Barclays or a Santander. And I just said to myself, I want to be something and I want to go somewhere and I just don't want that to be my story. But the reality is, in terms of my road, someone's been shot on my road, stabbed on my road. I've got literally people in my family, unfortunately, that have been murdered because of knife crime. So I grew up in a very heavy, hostile kind of environment where you kind of got like a PTSD always looking over the shoulder. You'll see literally police chasing people that you grew up with, people you know. I've got particular people who I grew up with when I was doing Knockdown Ginger. They're either in prison, dead, or they're actually hiding out because they had to flee the country because they were involved in crime. So when you've got that type of upbringing, you kind of do have a scarcity mindset. You kind of have this thing of only one of us will make it out. But the one thing that I needed to make sure I beat out of myself was the crabs in a bucket mentality. And I think a lot of people around me, unfortunately, we developed that mentality. Only one of us will make it out. So you put other people to get on top. And I didn't want that for myself. So I kind of changed actually my circle and my exposure probably when I was around 15, 16. I started kind of listening to other voices through YouTube. I was an avid YouTube listener. So I used to listen to Tony Robbins, Eric Thomas, Jim Rohn. So this is when I started getting interested in speaking. And also I've always been somebody from a young age. When I used to watch let's say, for example, TV shows, I used to always go in Breakfast Club and actually watch the interviews of the actors. So I was always intrigued by people's stories. I was always intrigued by what was their upbringing. And I'd always used to listen to the upbringings that were like the worst upbringings to give myself hope that if this person came from a single parent household, if this person came from nothing, if this person came from abuse, or if this person came from drugs or stuff like that, even though that wasn't my story, there were certain elements that I could still, you know, relate with, and it gave me hope. So my upbringing definitely wasn't the easiest, especially growing up without a dad in London. I definitely would say like I got a lot of my affirmation from the wrong men. So growing up, I used to actually have a lot of gang affiliated friends. So when I was 15, I actually nearly got stabbed. So when I was 15 years old, I had basically friends that are from the other side of the area that I grew up in. And they basically were selling me a BlackBerry. So I wanted to kind of buy a BlackBerry and give it to my friend. Don't ask me where I got the money from. I got the money. So I ended up literally making some money and I went to basically buy the BlackBerry, and that friend set me up. So he literally got other people to come out with a knife. The knife was probably about 8 inches. And by the grace of God, and this is when I started really believing that God actually had something for me. By the grace of God, he pulled out the knife, and the knife was basically at the tip, was basically by my abdomen. But at the time that he pulled out the knife and he put it towards my abdomen, a woman saw him. So she screamed and she said, "What are you doing?" And instead of him basically going forward to stab me out of fear, he went back. And I know that if he went forward, he would have stabbed me and God knows where I would have been. And I remember literally in that moment, just kind of feeling that fear and kind of making that decision that I'm not going to be involved with these type of people. And I remember literally the woman consoling me. She called the police. The police came and I ran because I grew up in the type of area that
snitches get stitches.
Snitches get stitches. And also, I'm going to be at the back of a police car. My mum has eyes everywhere in UM. So imagine I'm at the back of a police car. I see one auntie. Hey, Hayley's in the police car at the age of 15.
Yeah.
I ran. When the police came, I ran away.
I want to ask you something. So you said that only one of us would make it out, right? That was kind of the mentality people had. Did you see anyone who made it out? Because I remember growing up in a similar place. I grew up in Hackney, and the only people that I really saw making it out were footballers. Like, I don't remember seeing, like, having, in terms of people around me, like women who I'd seen make it out. Maybe once, maybe in assembly during secondary school, they brought in like a corporate lady who was dressed kind of cute. I was like, oh, I want to be that. But in terms of making it out, like, I don't think I saw, if it wasn't rapping and it wasn't football, I didn't see much.
Yeah, and those are male-dominated careers.
Yes.
In terms of women, no, I didn't. And this is no disrespect to anybody who had teenage pregnancy, but what I was surrounded by was teenage pregnancy. My cousin at the time who lived with me, pregnant at a teen. My cousin who lived below me, pregnant at a teen. My neighbor next to me, pregnant at a teen. So literally, I had this exposure around me that women get pregnant in their teens. So becoming basically a young mum. So that was kind of what I got exposed to. And I actually vowed to myself that I wouldn't necessarily make that my story. So I kept my virginity until I got married.
I love that.
Literally.
And I think for me, I don't know what it was for you, but I remember at school, teachers always used to, because we had a lot of teenage pregnant. People were getting pregnant from like year 7, year 8. And I think I'm one of those people who like to prove people wrong. And I think one of the teachers was saying, oh, like stuff about being the statistic, right? Oh, don't end up a statistic, don't be the statistic, whatever, which was, a lot of it was teenage pregnancy or premature, I guess, depends on how you define it, but being pregnant at a very, very young age. And that was kind of like my motivation to kind of be like, yeah, just to prove you wrong, that's not going to be me. But one of the things I wanted to ask you is, how did religion, so reason why I want you here is I want to talk a bit more about, one, obviously you've built wealth in a different way to a lot of the guests that I've had, which is through speaking. But also I want to talk about money and religion, or Christianity and money, right? So one of the first questions I want to ask you is, how did, I don't know if I should use religion or Christianity, shape your money views as you were growing up?
It's interesting because I didn't actually subscribe to the Christian religion until I was 18 years old. So I grew up in a Christian household. My mum was a Christian. She still is, but I didn't actually find Jesus until I was around 18. So it was around when I was 18 years old is when I started to more or less have more meaning to my life. And I started to actually realize, oh, wow, I'm actually created on purpose, for purpose. And it was kind of when I started to fall more in love with the Bible and fall more in love with God and building an intimate relationship with him. So in terms of my exposure to Christianity is more in my older years. And I definitely would say it shaped my it didn't necessarily just shape my insight on wealth, it shaped my insight on life. So even in terms of the Bible, I don't just see the Bible as a life book, I see the Bible as a business book. So I got into business from a very young age. So Reddy said, speaking from the age of 15, but at age of 15, I was also shot in. I was shot in the cookies, the crisps, all of that. I was basically selling all of that when I was in secondary school. So I've always kind of had a bit of hustler and a kind of a business mentality. And from the early age, like from 18 or 19, I always used to say this prayer and I was like, God, if this is something you don't want me to do, cut it off. And the crazy thing is, I got saved at a speaking engagement. I gave my life to Christ at a speaking engagement.
Oh,
I was booked to do a speaking engagement, and I ended up having my own encounter with the Holy Spirit at that speaking engagement. So it's one of those things where, if God wanted me to speak, why did he save me at a speaking engagement, if that makes any sense?
Okay.
So I always found it as God is using my speaking as a tool to glorify him, and also God wants me to shine my light. And if that's through wealth and if that's through business, that is also a way that God gets glorified. So I always kind of found it as a way that God wants to be glorified. And in terms of me building my business and speaking, that was basically what shaped me in terms of my insight on wealth and my insight on God and religion. And I definitely would say, like, Christianity has taught me more than anything. It's not about how much is in your bank account. It's about how you treat people. So even when you came and spoke about how the fact that, you know, when I met you, I was a beg and stuff like that. I'm not going to let that go, Lamide, I promise you. I'm probably going to say it 10 different times in this interview. I'll bring it up. No, but on a serious note, like, the reason why I'm so grateful that you brought that up, because that's the fruit of the spirit. It's about being loving. It's about being kind. It's about being considerate. Like, I never want to be somebody that I build up wealth and people cannot basically match my character to it. So that was actually my insight. My insight was, don't pray for wealth that your character cannot sustain. That was actually the first revelation that I had. So from the age of 18, I literally just used to say, God, deal with my character. God, give me wisdom. And just to give you context of a biblical story, there was a man called King Solomon. And it's actually, in terms of history, it's actually proven that he's actually the richest man that ever lived. So King Solomon's a real person.
Yes.
So he's actually believed to be the richest person that ever lived. And so King Solomon is actually written in the Bible. And King Solomon had a conversation with God. And God basically asked King Solomon, Solomon, what do you want? And he basically said, God, give me wisdom so I can rule the nations. And God responded back saying, because you asked of me for wisdom, I'm going to basically give you money that you did not ask for. And I'm also going to give you the heads of your enemy. But the interesting thing about that is that God gave him finance, or God gave him wealth because God could trust him with the character that would match the wealth. And I think that's what I learned. That's what is actually what shapes my insight on wealth, is the character and the wisdom.
Okay, that's interesting because a lot of people associate, whether it's subconsciously or consciously, being poor with being godly. People will cite verses like, it is easier for a camel to enter through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the gates of heaven. There's a verse like that.
Yes, there is.
And a lot of people do associate being poor with being godly, because there's also that encounter that Jesus had with the rich man, and he was like, Jesus, what more do I need to do? And then Jesus told him to go sell his possessions, right? Yes. And then come follow him. So a lot of people then associate like, oh, having wealth is not being godly because maybe it's greed or like money corrupts or all of that stuff. So What's your thoughts on that? Yeah.
Very interesting. So let's go back to that scripture that you just spoke about. In context, it was about the man who was a rich man who asked Jesus, how do I get into the kingdom of God? How do I get eternal life? And Jesus said, sell all your possessions. And he was really sad about it. Then that's when Jesus came and said, it's harder for a rich man to enter heaven than a camel going into the eye of a needle. That actually was speaking about your attachment to finance and your attachment to wealth. That's why I come and say money is not the root of all evil. It's actually the love of it. And I really do believe that, I think it's a lie from the pit of hell that being more poor is more godly. I think it's a lie from the pit of hell being more rich is more godly. It has nothing to do with your wealth. It has everything to do with your heart posture. And I think a lot of people need to understand that you can be a very wicked person and rich and be a very wicked person and poor.
Facts.
It has nothing to do with wealth. It has everything to do with your heart posture. And let's go back even in terms of wealth, right? Abraham was the richest man of the Eastern Hemisphere. That's in the Bible. Okay. So Abraham was somebody who had riches. The Bible even spoke about in Genesis 13 and Genesis 14, when Abraham had to basically part with Lot. He had land, and he said to Lot, which land do you want? So Abraham had a lot of assets. Even when you think about Moses in terms of the scripture, when Moses now had to lead the Israelites to the promised land, God gave them gold. And they created gold calves with that gold, which means the same thing that God can give you, you can make an idol. It's not that God doesn't want you to be blessed. God doesn't want your blessing to become an idol. And that is a heart posture thing. So the heart posture is that you can ask God for something, and then that same thing can actually take you out of the presence of God. And I think there's a lot of people need to understand that God cannot trust you with wealth beyond your heart posture, beyond your character. And I found that the previous years before I actually started really working with money and started actually really tapping into money, I started really praying that God deal with my heart. Not because, as I said, I want to be able to get in the room. I want to stay in the room. And there's a lot of people who tap into finance and they lose it just as quick as it came, simply because they didn't have the character and the wisdom, and they didn't have the type of personhood to sustain it. So I don't believe that God, you're more righteous if you're poor. I don't believe you're more righteous if you're rich. I believe your righteousness comes with your character. And let me tell you this, one of my favorite scriptures, and this is something that has sustained me, a noble name is greater than riches. I was a young black girl, came from a single parent household. I was speaking slang. I was a beg in Lamide's eyes. I'm joking, guys. But on a serious note, I was somebody that statistically, I should not be speaking with clients, big corporate clients who are twice my age. I shouldn't be somebody who's making 5 figures, getting flown around the world, working with senior executives across the world. It's never been written before and it's never been seen before. But what opened up those doors for me was not finance. I'm telling you, Lamide, there were sometimes my suits, they would be crinkly. There's sometimes that I was wearing Primark clothes. I didn't have the designer clothes. I had to use what I had, right? I didn't have money at the time when I first started speaking, but it wasn't money that opened up those doors for me. It was a character. It was the fact that I had a noble name. Those people who believed in me, believed in my heart, and they advocated for me. All these people who have made it in life, they always say there was someone that advocated for them. They always say there was one person that actually said their name in a particular room, and that's what changed their life. And that's what changed my life. And it's not money that can get you into those rooms. It's always favor. It's always favor, and favor cannot be bought. Favor cannot be bought. I always say that favor is a currency that's even better than money. And that's something I always pray for. God, give me favor. Favor is actually greater than money. So for me, when people are saying rich, poor, money is, I only think that money is the least that God can give you. If you have favored, the Bible says that Joseph was favored and he prospered in everything that he was doing. So yeah.
If you're enjoying this content, please don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. And if you would like to become an international property investor in Dubai or in the UK, the link to book a free consultation will be in the description box below. If you're not quite ready to invest yet, check out the affordable video courses that will also be linked in the description box below. And if you would like to relocate to Dubai, set up your business in Dubai, or anything else related to relocating to Dubai, check out www.theprofessionalnetwork.com. And one of the things that that also comes to mind as well is like the parable of the talents, right? Where, because I think in terms of playing it small, right? Let me let you explain that. I don't know if you could interpret, because for me, that kind of shows me like wealth stewardship, right? It's important what you do with what you have and what God has given you. I don't know if you have any insights from that as well.
Yeah, I always say that playing it small is a sin. That's what I take away from that scripture. Playing it small is a sin. That God has actually trusted you to multiply. I think a lot of the times when you think about that scripture, the one who buried his talent, he buried his talent because of fear and because of the opinion of man. And I wonder how many people are not tapping into everything that God has called them to do because they're scared what people think. And this is what I mean in terms of the fact that there's people who are not tapping into wealth and people who are not becoming everything they're meant to become because they're scared about what people are going to think, what people are going to say. And the reality is people are always going to say something. I'd rather be the person that you have something to say, but me, I'm right by God because I multiplied what God put in my hand. And I think the parable of the talents really taught me that, yes, there has to be fruit at the end of it. You know, I think about the scripture when Jesus saw a fig tree and it didn't bear fruit and he cursed it. Because when you think about it, a tree without fruit, you start to worry, what's wrong with it? If you put seed in the ground and you put soil and you put water and it doesn't bear fruit, you start to think, what's the issue? You start inspecting, is it an issue with soil? Is it the sunlight? Is it the humidity? Is it the environment? Because there's an expectation that seed is meant to bear fruit. And I think that every single one of us have gifts, every single one of us have things that God has deposited in us, and there's an expectation, hey, bear fruit. But I always say that fruit is nothing to do with the finance and the wealth that comes with it. Fruit is the character that comes out of it. You know, for me, I would always say that the end of my life is not going to be about how much money I made. The end of my life is how much did I look like Christ? And that's just my personal opinion in terms of my faith and my religion. So I think that, you know, there has to come a time where you understand that, you know, the parable of the talents wasn't just about wealth. It wasn't just about multiplying. It was about stewardship, like what I said. It was about really being able to look at the things that God has placed in your hands and being able to say, hey, I need to bear some fruit and I shouldn't be proud to go back empty. There's some people who are proud to go back empty to God. That's not going to be me. I honestly think, I'm not going to lie, I think it's actually quite embarrassing. The most I can say is like, you know, there comes a time when you're in school, let's go back to school, and the person that doesn't do homework, at first it's cool for year 7. Then you get to year 8, you think, okay, you don't want to do homework. You're the person that never do homework. Then when you get to year 11, you'll be like, that's you. Me, I have GCSEs to collect.
Literally.
Me, I have A-levels to collect. That silly behavior you're doing in year 7, it will not sustain you in uni. It will not sustain you. There's certain things that when you're in year 7, you can do goofy stuff. But when you're in year 11, 10, it's not cool anymore. So I think at first, yeah, when you're maybe not understanding and maybe you're fearful, you're young, I get it. But as you start to get older in life, similar to what you just shared about the fact that a lot of the guests you have is older, right? There's something that comes with age, personal accountability. And I think a lot of people are actually afraid to be personally accountable for what is in their hand. I remember hearing a quote that says, when you're born, you look like your parents. When you die, you look like your choices. And I think it's true. You will look like your parents. You look like your environment. I looked like the single, growing up in a single parent household, growing up in the borough of Newham when I grew up. Yes, I did look like that, but I'm not going to die that way.
I love that. So I want to move on to the importance of money in relationships, and in particular romantic relationships, right? So I was catching up on some of your content in preparation for this, and you and your husband were mentioning something about, I guess, maybe one of the years where you felt like money was the most scarce that impacted you guys' like personal or romantic relationship. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, finance is very important in terms of relationship. I know people come and say love is important, but so is money and so is stability. There's something that Davido says. He says, love is sweet and
when money enters,
love is sweeter. It's true. It's true. Guys, I'll be honest, my marriage is sweeter now that I live in Dubai. Oh, yes, it's very sweet. When I wake up in the view, oh, nummy. Oh, I'm so happy. Me and my husband, we skip in our apartment. We weren't skipping when we were living in Essex. We skip here in Dubai. I promise you that. My husband is so much happier here. And I didn't even realize how us even moving to a different country that literally made our marriage even sweeter. But also we developed the character. We developed the necessity so that we could also be happy. I definitely would say our happiness didn't necessarily just come from finance. Our happiness actually came from communication. But one of the areas that we weren't taught to communicate in was finance, simply because we both came from single parent households. So we never saw the exposure to parents having healthy conversations about money, because he only had his mum and I only had my mum. So we never saw that narrative. So we were basically navigating a new terrain. And I think that's a thing that a lot of people don't actually know how to do. They don't know how to have healthy conversations with their partner regarding finances. So I was even just having a conversation with someone in the car on the way here about how do I handle finances with my husband, because we have a joint business account, then we have a joint actual personal account, then he's got his personal accounts, then I have my personal accounts. So we're basically talking about how do we handle finances, how do we handle what things are coming out of the joint business, what's coming out of the joint personal, what's coming out of my account, what's coming out of his account. And that was a conversation that we had to have very early on in our marriage, to basically say, okay, when I have speaking engagements, does this go into the joint account? Does this go into my account? Does this go into your account? And also at the time when I got married to my husband, he had just left his job and I was freelancing in terms of speaking. And also at the time that I got married, my husband basically lost all his income because he was part of a business that basically flatlined. So he lost everything. So even in terms of our wedding, a lot of my savings basically covered our wedding. And I remember literally actually entering, and this is just me being honest, I'm open about this on my podcast, I entered into my marriage with a lot of resentment towards my husband because of finances, because I didn't realize how hurt I was at the fact that there was a lot of things that were coming out of my account that I never actually openly said that I was really hurt about it. And I think that, you know, now that we're in a healthier place, not just financially, but even in terms of communication, the thing that actually changed our marriage actually wasn't finances. Because when I had the conversation with my husband, telling him I forgive him and how hurt I was, we were still very broke. But the conversation is actually what changed our marriage. And funny enough, it was only after I had the conversation where I sat down with him and I was honest and say, hey, I have some resentment here. We prayed and we had a real honest conversation. I forgave him. Exactly a month after that was when I actually hit, when we released the course. And this is why forgiveness is so important. It has nothing to do with finance, it has everything to do with your heart posture, kind of similar to what I was saying before, because the funny thing is that I believe that God speaks, and I believe that God speaks like till this day. Obviously, God speaks to everyone differently, right? And at the time when we were really broke, I had actually been working as a personal assistant for somebody else. So literally right after my wedding, I needed some finance. So I literally pulled some of my speaking stuff and I basically got a job and I worked as a personal assistant, brand manager for somebody. And that was intense. Like literally, I was working crazy hours. I was so tired and I was getting annoyed because basically what I was making in a month is what I used to get paid for a 30-minute talk. So you can imagine the mental like disruption that I was feeling, because I'm like thinking, right, like I'm working all these hours in a month when I used to basically make this in 30 minutes. Like I promise you, it messed me up. Then also I'm dealing with that. Then on top of that, I'm dealing with the resentment that I had with my husband for the business that he was part of going wrong. And then me having spent all basically my savings basically towards the wedding. Like it was not even just the wedding, just in terms of like us moving house and getting ready. Like there was a lot of strain on me financially and I just kept it to myself. So when I had the honest conversation with him and I forgave him, God actually started speaking to me about me building a course with my husband. So my husband is a marketing guru. He's good at sales, funnels, all things like now he's into AI tech. So he's literally a tech marketing guru. So when I had the conversation with my husband after that, he was open to it. Whereas if I had that conversation prior, he would have never been open to it. And the funny thing is that I had the skill of speaking, I had the experience of speaking, but I didn't have the systems in place. I didn't know how to deal with that when my husband did. When we collaborated, that's when we literally went from I always say this, we literally only had £20 to our account that day that I did my launch event. And that £20 was literally all we had to get us home in an Uber. Thank God our friends actually offered to take us back, but we literally only had £20 in our joint account. And we thank God because literally at the end of the event, in terms of upsell, in terms of the course, we went from £20 to 20K. So I literally left that day with 20K, but I entered the day with £20. And that came off the collaboration. But that collaboration would have been possible if we didn't have an honest conversation, if we didn't forgive, and if we didn't have honest communication.
So what are the habits and like the mindset shifts would you say was like, what made that difference from when you say that you guys were broke to like being now in this financial abundance? What was that shift?
The shift was don't do it alone. Don't do it alone. The first time I did the course, I did it by myself. And I think a lot of people want to build their finance in vain. They want to be the person who basically has the I made it story. No, sometimes you have to say we made it story. And I think honestly, my life changed when I stopped saying I and I stopped saying we, and it went from me to we. So I think before it was very much kind of like, oh, I'm Hayley Mulenda. I want to be this global international speaker impacting lives. And I still am that. But I have the opportunity to come and say, this is something that my husband and I have been able to build, or this is something that me and my friend have been able to build. I've been able to build multiple layers and multiple incomes of wealth because I've been able to partner with other people who are already doing it. So I definitely would say collaboration is key. And you are somebody that knows that as well in terms of you've got businesses that are collaborating with other people. Wealth actually starts with we. The word wealth starts with we.
Literally.
And I remember literally hearing something, I think it's from Malcolm X, even illness becomes wellness when it's turned from I to we. And when I heard that is powerful. Like when it's I and it's just you, it's actually really dangerous. When it's we, it's so powerful. So I definitely say it's a collaboration. I'll say number 2, exposure. From a very young age, I always immerse myself around very successful people. And my mentors are literally are people who have changed my life. So someone I'm actually mentored by is someone like Dr. Eric Thomas. Dr. Eric Thomas is the highest paid Black speaker in the world right now. And he's my mentor. And he has literally changed my life in terms of speaking, mindset. But one of the things I love about Dr. Eric Thomas is that he's not just somebody who has succeeded in his speaking. This is somebody who gets paid 6 figures per talk. So this is not just somebody who, is a small guy in the speaking, but he's been married for 35 years. He's been somebody who has covenant relationship. His core team, he's been working with them for 20 years. So when you've been able to be around people like that, it changes your mindset. So even a mentorship and being exposed to the right voices and the right counsel, I would say number 2 was a huge mindset shift. And I'll say number 3, study. Literally the time that we was broke, Lamide, I studied like crazy. Like the amount of books that I read, the amount of YouTube videos that I read, like I was broke on purpose. Like I wasn't just broke for broke's sake. I wasn't feeling sorry for myself thinking, oh my gosh, there's no baked beans, no. I got onto YouTube. I said, okay, we have enough money to pay our rent. We have enough money to pay for the internet. The internet has to make me money. So I better be on this internet every single day, reading and watching what I need to read. So literally, I would definitely say, get the resources and learn. I always say that if I know it might sound like a mad statement, but if you're broke, it may actually be for a reason. Maybe you may be in that position to actually learn something so that you can actually make the wealth for yourself and realize that it's not about starting with money. It's actually about your mind. And there's so many people that have been able to make finance and make wealth from literally just an idea and studying. So I think a lot of people, if I'm being honest, make a lot of excuses. They make a lot of excuses. There's a lot of resources out there. There's people who are watching your podcast, for example. They can get particular nuggets. And I think a lot of people just make excuses because they're lazy and they don't want their circumstance to change. You say you want it to change. You don't want it to change that bad because you still watch Real Housewives of Atlanta more than you will getting on a podcast or reading a book.
One of the things that I love that you say is you're too broke not to be visible.
You're too broke not to be visible. 110%. You better be on that Zoom every single day. You better be on that Zoom every single day. You better be on that Instagram live, that LinkedIn live, whatever live you can find, you better be there. I've been somebody who has been on an Instagram live and somebody has wired me 20K after an Instagram live just for me to coach them. So I know when I talk about visibility, I know what I'm talking about. Like, you have to be visible. Majority of my speaking engagements, even my booking form, I have a particular question that says, how did you find out about Hayley? 90% of them say social media. So I've been able to literally scale my speaking career to 7 figures because of my content, because I've been able to be visible. And visibility has nothing to do with views, by the way, because I think a lot of people are kind of like, oh, I only have 10 views. I only have 100 views. Views goes to consistency. Visibility is about consistency. Visibility is about showing up even when you've got the one. And I share this story quite often about the fact that in 2018, I was doing some YouTube videos, kind of filming talks that I was doing. And these YouTube videos weren't getting anything more than 50 views, Lamide. And literally, I got an email in 2018 where someone was basically saying they wanted to book me to speak at Wembley Arena in front of 16,000 people. I was shocked. When I tell you I thought it was spam, I was like, nah, they've emailed the wrong person. And I remember coming back to them and I was asking them, how did you hear about me? They said, we found a YouTube video. They sent me a link. That video had 48 views. So a video that had 48 views opened the opportunity for me to speak at Wembley Arena in front of 16,000 people. Imagine if I stopped because I kept focusing on views. You're too broke not to be visible. It has nothing to do with views. It has everything to do with consistency.
I love that. Okay, final question for this section. As you have leveled up financially, has this had any impacts on your friendships and like the people around you?
Yes.
In what way? Come on now.
Okay. I don't know if it's something in terms of if it's an African culture thing or a Black people thing. I think there's an expectation for the person who does well, they have to sort everyone else out. I think it's an expectation of the strong friend, the wealthy friend, that they're strong enough to carry you or they're wealthy enough to carry you. And I think the sad impact I had with some friendships was a false expectation that I had to financially contribute. I've had particular family members that I no longer speak to simply because they had an entitlement to my finance and entitlement to what I was building. And I think it's actually really hurtful that someone feels very entitled to your wealth and very entitled to your hard work. This is 12 years worth of impact. This is 12 years worth of investment. This is 12 years worth of me working hard. I thank God that God is allowing me to tap into a certain level of finance, but it's 12 years. And you can't have an expectation that you are owed some or you're entitled to some simply because you've known someone since day one or because you have the same blood. No, like that's not right. And I definitely would say there's some friendships that change. And the reason why the friendships change is because I put better boundaries. I didn't realize I had survivor's guilt. For a long time, I started to feel guilty that I was the one that was blessed. And also I started to feel guilty that I was the one that had the testimonies. So some of the people that I cut off were my Christian friends. Because I started to feel bad that my testimonies were like, that my testimonies were different. Before my testimonies were like, oh, I don't even remember.
I had a headache.
Yeah, right. Like those testimonies, don't get me wrong, those testimonies are so just as powerful. But now my testimonies were like literally like groundbreaking. As I said, I'm 20 years old and I'm talking about, I'm getting paid 20K for a 45-minute talk. That's crazy. And now my testimonies are kind of like, oh, me and my husband are doing this. Oh, me and my husband are starting this. Me and my husband are tapping into this, investing into this. People are kind of like, And I'll be honest, that the friendships that got impacted the most were my entitled friends and my friends that were scrolling and not my friends that were congratulating. I started watching out for the people who would scroll and never say anything. I honestly believe those are the scariest people to be around. If you don't want to be somebody that would say congratulations, you can unfollow me. No, because are you watching for feed? Are you watching basically so you can have tab on me? Do you know what that's called? A monitoring spirit. You're there to monitor. You're not there to even congratulate. You're not even there to even, say nice things. You're just there to just watch. I'm just not that type of person. I'm so proactive with my support. If someone I love is doing something, I'm very much kind of like, how can I serve? How can I help? How can I basically help? What do you need from me that basically we can make this better? And it's really unfortunate that we're in a society that is very content with watching other people rather than actually contributing. So...
And I want to add to this because some people might feel like, oh, but if you made it, it should be your job to send a ladder back down to help other people. And I will say, like, on your behalf, you are definitely someone who likes to help people even when nobody asked you for the help. Like, it's true. So for you to say that means that person really must have been, or whoever it was, those people really must have taken the liberties because you help regardless.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting. And I think a lot of people will be able to relate and especially when you share your successes online, that's why a lot of people actually don't, because they know that this auntie that they haven't spoken to from years is going to come back now and feel entitled to give me some of that.
And this is why, in terms of even sharing my success online, people don't actually know that I'm doing it as a means of help. Because I want people to be exposed to know that, hey, if God can do this for me, you too, God can do it for you. And like what you said, sis, like my thing is never to, not help people. I have a heart to help, don't get me wrong. But when you are entitled and you feel entitled to it, that is when I have to put my boundaries in. And before, I was very blind to it. So the person that actually put those boundaries in place was actually my husband. My husband basically said, Hayley, you're going to run dry. And basically you will run our account dry if you constantly keep giving. So it's actually my husband, because it came to a point where literally everyone was, not everyone, but there's a lot of people who come to me about financial needs. And I'll just be like, yeah, I'll do this. Yeah, I'll do it. It's fine. I'll cover this. And my husband was kind of like, nah, sir. No, you're not. You're not going to be doing that, especially because it's a joint account. Before, he was like, you could have done that when it was your personal account. Our joint account, no. And I'm a woman who works in collaboration with my husband. I always say that, I need agreement from my husband, especially when it comes to our finances. That's just how we work and how we maneuver things. And I didn't even realize more until actually this year. I had a situation where I was really sick. I'll never forget this. I had a situation where I was really sick. And literally I was really sick in Dubai, and someone basically found out I was sick and they called me to ask for money. Yeah, they called me I was literally in hospital and they called me to ask for money.
So we're going to be moving on to the Wealth Woe segment, which is basically one of the listeners sends in a dilemma that they're having and they want your opinion on what they should do. So this person says, I'm a 25-year-old creative living in a dysfunctional home. I've had opportunities to build wealth, but because of perceived failure in the informed pessimism stage and consistent anxiety of surviving, I lose momentum and start a new idea or get overwhelmed with options. How can I stay consistent?
Oh, well, the first thing they have to deal with is definitely the mindset. Consistency is a mindset. And I think if they don't deal with their outlook on consistency, they will never find consistency. So I think it's about asking yourself, why is it that you're not consistent? I think back to a scripture that says you prosper as much as your soul prospers. And I think a lot of people underestimate how much your soul issues impact your wealth. So your inability to heal actually can limit your business. So there's something that my mentor once said that says your finance can never go beyond your healing. And there's many people who are rich, who are very broken. But I always say it's not about getting in the room, it's about staying in the room. And consistency isn't about actually getting there, it's about staying there. So it's about dealing with that, whether it's your daddy issues, mommy issues, whether it's your inability to commit to others, whether it's your inability to commit to healing. Have an honest conversation with yourself. So I think the first thing is, one, have an honest conversation with yourself, acknowledging and admitting where you need healing. Number two is, if you have friends, asking them for your blind spots. It's a hard conversation. But if you are willing to basically commit to your healing, wealth will be so much easier for you to attain, sustain, and to build. And I'll say thirdly, if you're somebody who is finding it really hard to be consistent, try and see what is it you are the most consistent with and go back to it. I think a lot of people are afraid of going back to the thing that they failed at or the thing that didn't work. And that was a scenario that I was once in. I released a course in 2020. Every single person asked me for a refund. But then I went back to the course building in 2023 and I made 6 figures in 6 weeks. Imagine if I'd given up at that. I wouldn't have been able to tap into the wealth and been able to do the things that I'm doing now. So I think go back to the thing that worked for you and see, whether it's something you could build on now. Because I always say new season comes with new grace. Maybe the season that you were doing that thing, you didn't have grace for it. And maybe you have the grace and capacity now. So don't be afraid to go back onto old things because there may be new grace for it.
What if where you are healing, or you spoke about healing. So this person obviously mentioned a dysfunctional home. So if the dysfunctional home has caused something and you're trying to heal from it, but you're still living in that dysfunctional home, what does this person do?
I think if you're living in a dysfunctional home, is really finding them safe spaces where you can block dysfunction out. I know it may be hard because it's where you live, but I always say, especially in terms of people I'm coaching, what can you do daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, yearly. So especially in terms of getaways. So what can you do daily? Maybe it's an hour a day in a cafe shop or coffee shop. Maybe it's weekly, going to a friend's or going to a coffee shop again. Maybe monthly, maybe taking yourself away for the weekend. And also being able to build your finances according to that. So you know that this is something I'm facing. So pardon me. So financially, I have to basically put money aside that monthly I can afford to get away. Quarterly, I can get away for a week. Yearly, I can get away for a month. I don't know. So I think it's also being able to see financially what can you commit to. If you can't commit to a getaway for a week, maybe commit to a day or 2 days, even if it's every quarter. So you also have something to look forward to. As human beings, we thrive off goals. If you have something to look forward to, you're more likely to work towards it. So if you actually know that, hey, I want to be able to take myself on holiday every quarter, and you know that financially you cannot meet that, your consistency will have to kick in because there's something you're looking forward to. There's something you need to pay. There's something that you need to reach. So you will force yourself into consistency because you know that there's a goal that you want to reach at the end of it.
I like that. So let's go back to what you said about your course. So you said you launched a course, everyone asked for a refund. What happened?
So I would definitely say I was underprepared. And I was reactive rather than proactive.
Okay.
And this is why it's so important in terms of business, be proactive and not reactive. COVID hit and my industry got hit quite badly. Obviously being a public speaker, majority of my events and my income came from physical events. So at the time that I started speaking pre-COVID, virtual speaking engagements weren't a thing. Virtual speaking engagements only became a thing in COVID and post-COVID. So prior to COVID, all my speaking engagements were in person. And I had about 20 speaking engagements that were booked that all got cancelled because of COVID. So you can imagine my income had just literally gone just like that. And that was probably at the time, about 25K, 30K worth of speaking engagements that literally just went because of COVID. So you can imagine I was panicking, even though I was able to get on furlough in terms of my business. It still wasn't enough in terms of what was expected to come in. And even though I was in my final year of university, I still had savings, I still had things that I wanted to do. And COVID just shifted everything for me. So I did a course. So I did a course, quickly filmed a course, had cameras set up, filmed a course, basically how to make 6 figures from speaking, because at the time I had made 6 figures, and now by the grace of God, I've been able to do 7 figures through speaking. But at the time I was basically teaching the framework of how to build your brand, how to price yourself, how to create a keynote, how to develop trainings, workshops, coaching. So I did a whole course about it. But because I was reactive, as I said, some of the content that I was saying was very much kind of I just need to get something out there. It wasn't really properly planned. And because I needed it more for money than I did more for impact.
Right.
Even though I did want people to actually learn about speaking and learn more about the business, because a lot of people don't know about speaking. They don't actually know you can get paid millions, and you can I've literally been able to create that and create a source of income and wealth for myself through speaking. A lot of people don't understand the industry, so I was also educating people about the industry as well. And so because of that, the systems weren't in place properly. The website wasn't working properly. There were some videos that weren't loading, some videos that I didn't film, that I forgot to film. My videographer didn't edit it. It was just a mess. So what was basically marketed, it was kind of it was 80% of what they paid for, they got 80% of it. But anything less than 1%, you shouldn't sell. And as I said, I was reactive. So at the time, people had gone through the course and it was just kind of this isn't actually what I actually went in for it for, if that makes any sense. And at the time, I only sold the course for about £200. And yeah, it was just kind of I love the course, I love the content, but it just wasn't making sense. Certain things weren't loading, the website wasn't loading. I couldn't access this, I couldn't access that. There was just too many technical issues. And then I was just kind of literally, at that point, it's what can you do? You just have to refund people. So literally, a few people asked for refunds. And at that point, I was just just the complaints, I just said, let's lock it off and refund everybody. So yeah, eventually everybody kind of asked for their money back. And I only literally had about 10 people that bought the course anyway. So yeah.
So that's what in here. So I think this person sent in this dilemma off the back of my newsletter. And there's this thing called it's the cycle of emotion, or the economic cycle of emotion. When you start something new, you are in the stage of uninformed optimism, which is where, even when you're setting goals and stuff, everyone's so excited. You underestimate how much work it takes to achieve certain goals, right? So because you're uninformed, you're very optimistic. As you go through that thing and then you start to see how hard it is, you kind of fall into this informed pessimism where you actually realize this goal that I thought I was going to achieve, that was going to be super easy and simple, and I thought I had it all planned out, the motivation and all the serotonin that was built up in me when I was thinking about that goal, or the dopamine, should I say, that's all gone now. I'm in the stage of informed pessimism where I know what it actually takes to put on a good course, but I'm now pessimistic because of how hard it is. So this is the stage that this person is saying that they get to. So they start something, they're motivated or whatever, they go through with it, but then it hits this trough where they're like, this is actually really hard. So you were kind of in that stage. How did you come up on the other end where it's kind of like what they would call informed optimism, yeah? When you know how hard it's going to be, but you're still optimistic about it. But some people don't leave that informed pessimism stage. Like every time they start something, it gets hard, they lose all the momentum for it and they don't pick themselves up. And what you will find is that they will continue going back to the start, trying another idea, trying another business because, oh my God, everyone's saying like, this is how you make money now. Property is how you make money now. I don't know. Affiliates is how you make money. And they continuously go back to the start, realize it's hard and do not ever make it to the other end, right? So how did you come out of that? Because I think this is what this person is also dealing with, just stuck in that place where, oh my God, it's not going how I wanted it to go. And
yeah. Do you know, one thing I definitely always say is don't follow passion, always follow solution. I think a lot of people follow passion. I think a lot of people kind of like, I'm passionate about that, so let me jump on that. And I think that is actually one of the worst things to do. I think you have to be able to provide solution in a scenario. AI right now is booming because it provided the solution. Human beings are lazy. They want things done quickly. I often say that I wish that ChatGPT was available in my final year university. I wish.
Listen.
I wish. Those 10,000 words, I promise you, I would have put those prompts in. I said, right. I would have been typing my life away.
100%.
Do you know what I mean? And I think the reason why AI and ChatGPT and all the many different AI tools that people are utilizing in their business is because it's solving a solution. If you came and told me 10 years ago someone was going to be passionate about AI, nobody would ever say that. What they're trying to do, with any business, what they're always trying to do is they're trying to find a gap that is going to make someone's life easier or more convenient, or it's basically contributing to a greater cause, or et cetera, et cetera. So going back to what I said in terms of question you asked, how is it that I got out of that? Is that I didn't actually follow my passion. Okay. I followed the solution. The solution was that there was many people who wanted to learn how to speak and they wanted to create a different income through speaking and they didn't know how to. So I provided the solution there. I'm passionate about speaking to others. I'm passionate about empowering others. But I understood there was a gap. A gap was there was many people who didn't understand the business behind speaking and they didn't know how to speak well, articulate themselves well. Public speaking is one of the third most feared biggest fear in the world. So some people actually fear speaking more than they do death. So when you've understood how big of a fear that is for many people, and you can now help somebody become a better speaker, break that fear, you're breaking a limitation in their head. And I find that, you know, when I was able to really fall in love with the solution, that's when I was able to see the other side, because every obstacle that came, I knew the solution was worth the risk, if that makes any sense. And there's something that a good friend of mine says, his name is Jamal King, and he says, your level of exposure determines your level of success. And I just literally surrounded myself with people who had done it, people who had made it, people who literally succeeded in that. And I literally engrossed myself in it. So I went into trainings, I went to different events, I engrossed myself into different programs, people who were doing well, people who were making multi-6 figures or 7 figures, even 8 figures through literally digital products and online courses. When I was able to see them hit that success, that was when that gave me the motivation to be like, yeah, you too, Hayley. And I've just always said, surround yourself with what you want to see. You know, if you surround yourself with what you want to see, you have no other option but to do it. You know, there's a common phrase, what is it, that says, if you want to learn Spanish, go to Spain. You're forced to speak Spanish. No one speaks English. So if you're around people who literally are succeeding in that place, you're forced to get better in that area. So I definitely would say to anybody who is struggling from going from the place of, you know, the pessimism to now the optimism. I think it's really surround yourself with people who can actually show you that it can be done.
I think it's so true, because also when you surround yourself with people who are either at the place that you want to be or even on that journey, you realize that the problems that you are having is normal. Like a lot of the times we feel like when we encounter a problem, it's like, oh my God, the world is against me. I'm the only person. But then when you realize, no, actually everyone who has gotten to the place that I want to get to have also gone through this issue and have pushed past it. That kind of gives you the confidence. But I think also something that you're kind of saying is that even though your means of delivering that course wasn't at the optimum that it wasn't a reflection of you. You still had the solution. You still knew how to do the thing. It was just the way you delivered it wasn't the best at that point. So that was something that you can change, because a lot of people, when they fail, they take it as a reflection on themselves. Like, oh, I am a failure. I don't know how to do this, rather than I just went about this the wrong way. Right? So I really like that.
I was going to add on to that.
Okay.
It's funny that you said that, because the first ever talk that I did when I was 15 years old, don't ask me how I got to there, was I said that failure is an event, it's not a person. And I still stand by that. I don't know how I don't know how I got that revelation at age of 15, but I still stand by that. Failure is an event, it's not a person. Obviously, in the context when I was speaking at age of 15, I was talking to GCSE students to motivate them for their GCSEs, if their mocks, if you failed. It's an event, it's not a person, but it's something that you need for the rest of your life. Like it's an event, it's not a person. Don't ever take failure personal.
That's interesting. Okay, so let's quickly move on to the quick fire money question. So 3 questions, and just give just answer the question as briefly as you can. So the first question is, what is the best investment you've ever made?
In myself. In terms of courses, mentorship, I have spent 6 figures actually on my mentorship. So being coached and mentored by the top people in the world, top industries. So whether that's speaking, business, whether that's systems, funnels, like we've invested a lot of money in terms of courses and development, and I've made the money back 5 times as much.
Imagine. What is the biggest money mistake you've made?
Being too kind.
Ooh.
Being too kind. And that survivor's guilt, and feeling like because I have finance, I have to sponsor everyone else. The Bible actually says, love your neighbors as yourself. So you have to love yourself first and fill that up. And how you bless others has to come from overflow.
Wow. That's a new one. We've never got that one, but I see that. I see that. And then the final question is, what is one piece of advice you'd give to someone who's trying to build wealth globally?
Ooh, globally. As I said before.
Or just build wealth, whichever one.
I like the globally though, because one of the things that I did in terms of speaking is I didn't just settle with finding who the top speakers were in the UK. I studied who were the top speakers in America, in the Middle East, in Africa. If you want to be able to build wealth globally, study the markets globally. So whatever business you feel like you're called to, do a SWOT analysis in the different businesses, in the different sectors, in the different industries and the different locations. Because I think a lot of the times you're just kind of limited to that one border. But if you're saying you want to do something globally, study globally and also invest in the land. Before moving to Dubai, I actually traveled here about 10 different times before I actually moved here. And I don't believe that I don't believe a country should open up to you until you invest into it. So I didn't have the expectation that Dubai was going to open up to me if I didn't invest into it first. So I think a lot of the times when you're building globally, try your best to actually travel there. Go to the country, even if it's just to pray or just to invest or just to network. Do what you can to actually build that kind of reputation and that kind of ground in the country, wherever you feel like you're called to build. So yeah.
I love that. I feel like we could go on for a very long time, but we have run out of time, unfortunately. Where can the people find you if they want to hear more about your story, contact you about your courses or your services?
Yeah, so you can find me at Hayley Mulenda everywhere, www.hayleymelenda.com. I will spell it Mike Uniform Lima Echo November Delta Alpha. That's my last name in terms of, sometimes when they come and say, how do you spell your last name? You have to do Mike Uniform Lima Echo November. Anyways, I'm sure that you guys will see the links below. But definitely. Literally at Hayley Mulenda everywhere is where you can find me.
Oh, thank you so much for coming. That was so good.
Thank you for having me.